How you doing there? Welcome back to Babble on Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Mem Zayin, Daf 47 of Masechta Zevachim. Friends, on Daf 47 we wrap up the fourth parak of Masechta Zevachim, parak Beis Shammai, and we begin the fifth, the celebrated, famous parak of Ezehu Mekoman Shel Zevachim, which of course is part of the Shacharis service, as part of the Korbanis that we say at the beginning of Shacharis. We learn all of the Mishnayos of Perek Ezehu Mekoman. We will have the zchus, the opportunity to learn, of course, the Mishnayos, but also, of course, the Gemara of Ezehu Mekoman, beginning today. So, friends, a brief outline of today's daf. The first section discusses whose intention is important. This goes back to the Mishnah that we had yesterday, where, of course, we saw the opinion of Rabbi Yossi, that he had said that it's a T'nai Bezdin, that you don't actually have to have any intention at all when offering korbanos, not for any particular korban. And that was out of concern of the fact that, an appreciation for the fact that the intention of the kohen who's doing the, let's say, the shechita, also the kabbalah, halacha, zrika, it's his intention that's important. So even if the owner's intention is, let's say it's a chatas, l'shem chatas, but if the kohen is thinking of some other korban, so then the korban will be puzzle, even though the owner had the right intentions. So we're going to discuss in the first section of today's daf a machlokas about whose intention is really important when it comes to korbanos and when it comes to some other things as well. And that will be the conclusion of the fourth parak of Masechta Zevachim, and then we begin the fifth parak of Masechta Zevachim, parak Ezehu Mekoman Shel Zevachim, where I guess we will learn about the places for Zvachim, let's say, starting with Kodshei Kodshim. Anyways, that is what we have in store for today's daf. So friends, come along, join me, and let us learn Daf Mem Zayin of Masechta Zevachim. Friends, we will begin on Daf Mem Zayin, Amid Aleph, 5 lines into the daf by the 2 dots. 5 lines into the daf by the 2 dots. She'ena machshava oleches el achar ovid. Right, that was that the very that was the last line in the Mishnah on Daf Mem Vav Amud Beis. We had said that she'ena machshava oleches el achar ovid, that the machshava, that the, of course, when it comes to korbanos, there's machshava like pigul, there's machshava of lishma, when it comes particularly to a chatos and a korban pesach, as we know already from the first daf, from the first Mishnah of Masechta Zevachim. So whose intention, whose machshava is important here? So the machshava of the ovid, the machshava of the one doing the work, that's whose intention is important here. What about the intention of the owner? Not important. So even let's say it's a korban chatas, and the owner has in mind that I'm offering a korban chatas here, right? I'm bringing a korban chatas here. But the one doing the work, the kohen, is thinking for whatever reason of some other korban. Well, then it's going to be possible. However, the opinion expressed in our Mishnah is unlike the following Tana. Amar Balazar Bar Yossi. Says Rabbi Elazar Bar Yossi, Shamaiti shabaylim mefaglin. That says Rabbi Elazar Bar Yossi that even the owners could be mefagel. That if you have a korban, if you have a kohen he's offering the korban for the owner and he's doing everything properly, but the owner has in mind that, so even though the kohen, when the kohen's doing Kabbalah Saddam, he's all good, he's having the proper intentions, but the owner of the korban has in mind that the Kabbalah Saddam should be with the intention of eating it chutz lizman or something. So the intention of the owner can actually affect pigul, even though the owner is not the one doing the avodah. That is the opinion of Rabbi Elazar Bar Yossi. Rav, my time with Rabbi Elazar Bar Yossi. Rava says, how come Rabbi Elazar Bar Yossi holds this way? Because the pasuk says vehikriv amakriv. That the pasuk says vehikriv amakriv, that it's the makriv, the owner, the one who's bringing the korban, he's the one, I guess, who's considered like he's also offering it. And it says by pigol, v'hamakriv also lo yechoshev. So because the owner of the korban is called the makriv, it's considered like he's part of the, the one, he's part of the, I guess, even though he's not technically doing the work, he's called the makriv. And makriv also is the same thing that it says by machshava, by pigol, right? Hamakriv also lo yechoshev. So therefore, the owner who's called a makriv, his intention, his makriv also lo yechoshev, right? That the makriv, and we're referring to the owner as the makriv also. So lo yechoshev, he shouldn't have any improper thoughts, and if he does, it can be considered pigol, according to Rabbi Elazar bar Yossi. Amar Abaye says, Abaye, Rabbi Elazar bar Yossi, Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar, interesting, 3 different Tanoim, all of whom who have different variations of Elazar and Eliezer in their names. Okay, so you have Rabbi Elazar bar Yossi, Rabbi Eliezer, and Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar. Kulus Sruli, they all hold Zeh mechashiv v'zeh oved. Havya machshava. All 3 of them, Rabbi Elazar bar Yossi, Rabbi Eliezer, and Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar, all of them hold, again, kulus Sruli, they all hold Zeh mechashiv v'zeh oved havya machshava. That if you have one party doing the thinking, doing the machshavaing, and another party doing the work, it's still considered a machshava. So if we're talking about pigol, for example, we're gonna see different examples of it. But let's say we're talking about pigol, so you can have the owner doing the machshava of chutz lezmano, and you can have the kohen doing the avoda, doing the work, and it would still be considered machshava. It would still be considered machshava's pigol. Rabbi Elazar bar Yossi Adamar. So Rabbi Elazar bar Yossi, as we just saw his opinion, right? That he says that we saw the opinion of Rabbi Elazar bar Yossi that the owner can affect pigol. Rabbi Eliezer, where do we see Rabbi Eliezer's opinion that the owners, that the thoughts of the owner can affect sort of what's going on, even though he's not the one doing the work? The Tanan is willing to Mishnah in Chulin, right? I think I'd mentioned yesterday when we were learning the Mishnah that it relates to a Mishnah that I was learning in Chulin. This is mamish the Mishnah. That what if you have a Yid, and a Yid slaughters an animal? Okay, so you have an Oved Kochavim, he comes with a sheep to a Yid, and he says, "Hey Yid, can you please slaughter this sheep for me?" It doesn't need to be kosher per se for the Oved Kochavim, but an Oved Kochavim comes to a Yid, and he asks the Yid if he could slaughter his animal for him. Right? So Oved Kochavim comes to Yid with a sheep and says, "Hey, can you slaughter my sheep for me?" The Yid says, "Sure, no problem." And he slaughters the animal. The shaila is, will the animal be considered a kosher animal? Right? I don't know, let's say the Yid wants, let's say the Oved Kochavim gives it to him, or whatever. Is the animal going to be considered kosher? So so again, Tanna Kama says that if a Yid were to slaughter an animal for an Oved Kochavim, shchita so ksher, it's kosher shchita. And if, and he would be able to eat from it, right? The Yid would be able to eat from it. Rabbi Eliezer posel. Rabbi Eliezer says, no, it's possible. Why? Because the Oved Kochavim, even though he's not doing the shchita, it's the Yid doing the shchita, but the Oved Kochavim may have in mind an intention of avodah zarah. And therefore, Rabbi Eliezer says that that's significant, that we have to consider the intention of the owner of the Oved Kochavim, and therefore, even though it's a Yid doing the shchita, and technically it's by the books, it's a kosher shchita, but nonetheless, the animal will be possible since it is for an Oved Kochavim. The Oved Kochavim, we have to be concerned that he's having, that his mind is on avodah zarah. Rav Shimon ben Elazar, Titania, Rav Shimon ben Elazar, we learn a brayso that Klal Amar Rav Shimon ben Elazar, says Rav Shimon ben Elazar, Kol she'ein kosher le'atzniya ve'ein matzniyin kamou v'hochshu lazeh ve'etzniyo uva'acher ve'otziyo nischayv zeh b'machshava shel zeh. Let's read that again. Says Rav Shimon ben Elazar, so Klal Amar Rav Shimon ben Elazar, Kol she'ein kosher le'atzniyo. Okay, so you have something that you shouldn't be storing away. For example, let's say it's Asur Ba'Noah. So I guess you shouldn't be storing it away if it's something that's asur bana. Okay. Vein matzniin kamo, or let's say you have something that's mutter bana, but it's less than a shear. It's a small amount that people don't normally store away. But for whatever reason, this person put it away. Okay, so I don't know. Ruvain has something that he put away that it's a small amount. Normally it would be considered insignificant, but for whatever reason, Ruvain felt that this was a significant amount, and he stored it away. And this is talking about on Shabbos. Now Shimon comes and he takes this small little thing outside from Rishus Yochid to Rishus Harabim. So on Shabbos. Now normally, if it's Pachus Mikashir, right? If you remember from Masechta Shabbos, it's funny. Taka, somebody messaged me randomly today with a shaila about Totzah on Shabbos. Anyways, not like paskening a shaila. I don't do that. But like he was just had a question from a Gemara about Totzah on Shabbos. But anyways, about like, and it had to do with like minimum shears and stuff. Interesting. But anyways, so normally one would in order to be chayev for Otzah on Shabbos, there would have to be sort of a significant shear. Now, what happened in this case is you have less than a significant amount of whatever it is that we're talking about. However, Reuven, for whatever reason, felt that he wanted to put it away. It was significant to him. Now Shimon comes and he's motzeh from Rishus Yochid to Rishus Harabim on Shabbos. So guess what? Even though it was normally it would be it would be considered less than a proper amount. However, the fact of the matter is, for whatever reason, Reuven, the owner of this thing, felt that it was significant, even though it was less than a standard shear. But Reuven felt it was significant. So the fact that the owner, that Reuven, attributed significance to this thing, Shimon is going to be chayiv for being motzei it on Shabbos. Okay, so we just had 3 examples where the intention of the owner is significant, whether it's like Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Yossi with regard to Pigul, or Rabbi Eliezer with regard to Shchita, or Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar with regard to Otzah on Shabbos. Tarvayu islu Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Yossi. Now, Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar they both agree, right? So Rabbi Eliezer, who says that we're concerned about the machshava of the owner by Shchita, Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar by Shabbos, they would also agree with Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Yossi with regard to Pigul by Korbanis, that the machshava of the owner is important, is relevant. How come? Well, hashta b'chutz amrinan b'fnim mibaya. Friends, out of all these scenarios, Korbanis, Shchita by Chulin, like Rabbi Eliezer, Shabbos, out of all these scenarios, the only context in which the Torah explicitly talks about machshava is the context of Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Yossi, Pigul, Lo Yechoshev. So therefore, if Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar are going to say that the machshava of the owner is important, is relevant, by non-Pigul scenarios, by Shchita of Chulin, by Shabbos, well then certainly they would say that by Pigul, where Dafka talks about machshava, certainly the machshava of the owner will be significant, and they would agree with Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Yossi that the machshava of the owner can affect Pigul. Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Yossi leislu de tarvayu. Now the inverse is not true. That Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Yossi, who says that dafka by Pigul we go based on the machshava of the owner, he would not agree. He would not necessarily hold like Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar, that we go based on the machshava of the owner by these non-Pigul scenarios, by Shabbos, by Chulin, Shchitas Chulin, because Dilma befnim hu de'aminon b'chutz lo aminon, because possibly, right, because Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Yossi would say, look, when it comes to Korbanos, when it comes to Pigul, where the Torah specifically talks about you have to have the proper machshava, so says Rabbi Allah Rabbi Yossi, look, in that scenario, I say that we have to even consider the machshava of the owner. I don't know. They would have to consider the machshava of the owner when it comes to Otzah and Shabbos. So when it comes to Shchita for an Oved Kuchav. Reb Shimon ben Elazar Islay de Reb Eliezer. Now Reb Shimon ben Elazar, who says that we consider the machshava of the owner by Shabbos, would agree that with Reb Eliezer, that we consider the machshava of the owner by Shchita. Because hasta b'Shabbos aminun, because if Reb Shimon ben Elazar says that even by Shabbos we're considering the machshava of the owner, and not necessarily just that of the one who's motzi it on Shabbos, we're considering machshava of the owner on Shabbos, well then he would certainly agree with Rabbi Eliezer that we would consider the machshava of the owner by Shchita. How come? Because by Avodah Zarah, right, which is what we're concerned about, right, doing Shchita for an Oved Kuchavim and what his intention is. By Avodah Zarah, it says, as Rashi points out, Zoveach le'Elohim yocharam bilti la'Hashem levado. So Zoveach le'Elohim yocharam is talking about Avodah Zarah, bilti la'Hashem levado. We compare slaughtering to Avodah Zarah to slaughtering for Hashem. That basically will compare Shchita for Avodah Zarah to Shchita for Hashem. And by Shchita for Hashem, we had said that machshava is important. So therefore, I can extend that to Shchita for Avodah Zarah to say that machshava is important. And therefore, if Reb Shimon ben Elazar says that even by Shabbos we're considering the machshava of the owner, certainly then by Shchita for an Oved Kuchavim, where there's this comparison to Korbanis, we would consider, and by Korbanis of course there's Lo Yichashiv, there's machshava explicitly in the Torah, so therefore certainly Reb Shimon ben Elazar would agree with Rabbi Eliezer that when it comes to Shchita, for an Oved Kuchavim, we would consider the machshava of the owner. Rabbi Eliezer lays to Reb Shimon ben Elazar. However, Rabbi Eliezer, who says that we consider the machshava of the owner by Shchita, for when it's for an Oved Kuchavim, and there's that, right, Zoveach l'Hashem yocharam, built to Hashem levado, comparing to Korbanos, where we're concerned about Yechoshev. So Rabbi Eliezer would say, okay, that's by Shchita, but he wouldn't agree with Reb Shimon ben Elazar by Shabbos. Rabbi Eliezer lays laid Reb Shimon ben Elazar because Dilma b'avodas kuchav mudaminon kein befnim, because maybe, says Reb Shimon ben Elazar, maybe says Rabbi Eliezer that davka by Shchita for an Oved Kuchavim, Davka by Shchita for an Oved Kuchavim, where there's that comparison, right? Zovech le'lim yocharam, built to Hashem levado. It's comparison to Kein Befnim. It's comparison to Korbanos, where we're concerned, where machshava is explicitly written. So therefore, we're concerned about the machshava of the owner. Aval Shabbos, but maybe when it comes to Shabbos, Rabbi Eliezer would argue, Meleches machshavos asa Torah. Of course, we know that to be chayiv on Shabbos it requires meleches machshavos, requires intention, right? That you have to know, as Rashi points out, either you have to know that you're doing a proper malacha, or that or he intended to do malacha, but he didn't realize it was a malacha on Shabbos. Either he knew it was Shabbos, but he didn't realize that this was a malacha, or that he knew it was a malacha, but he didn't realize it was Shabbos. But in this case, he didn't even realize that he was doing anything bichlal, right? Meaning the one doing it, the one being motzi on Shabbos, it's less than a shear. The owner of whatever this is, this thing that's being taken out, that's is an insignificant amount. For whatever reason, the owner felt it was significant, but the person taking it out on Shabbos, he doesn't know what the owner was thinking, and in his mind, he didn't realize he was even doing it. It wasn't meleches machshavos. In order for the taker outer to be chayav, he would have to do a meleches machshavos. It would have to be something with intent. And over here, in his mind, it's a small little thing, and it's an insignificant thing, and he's not doing it with proper intent, and therefore Rabbi Eliezer would argue that on Shabbos he would be potter regardless of the intention of the owner who thought it was significant. Adjon Olach Beishamai. We will come back to Perek Beis Shammai. And now, friends, we are up to Perek Ezehu Mekoman. Ezehu Mekoman Shel Zevachim. Sound familiar? Anybody, of course, who says Korbanos in the morning, this will be very familiar, this parak. At least the Mishnayos of it. The Gemara is a shtickle challenging. Ezehu Mekoman Shel Zevachim. What are the places for Korbanos? Kodshe Kodshe. When it comes to Kodshe Kodshe, who can give me examples of Kodshe Kodshe? Korban Chatas, Korban Osham, Korban Ola. apparently, I think Shamay Tzibor, Zivchei Shamay Tzibor, Hashemus Eilan, Hashemus. Yeah, I think Zivchei Shamay Tzibor, I think, might also be, makes sense, Kachim. Yeah, that's Dafka the Kivsei Atzeres, I think. I think Dafka on Shavuos that come with the Shtei Lechem. Anyways, let's focus on Chatas, Osham, and Ola. So, Ezehu Mekoman Shel Zevachim, what's the places for Korbanos? Kodshei Kodshim, when it comes to Kodshei Kodshim, let's say Ola, Chatas, Shlomim, Osham, Shchitason Batzafon, they are slaughtered in the north of the Azar. Now, I was debating whether I should bring in a diagram for this. In the end, I didn't go for it. But basically, it's in the north of the Azar. Basically, the diagram was just to be to show the north of the Azar. But we've seen diagrams with the Azar before. You have the you have the Mizbeach in the southern half of the Azara with the ramp there at the south, and then there's the north of the Azara. I've seen in the past a three-way machlokas between I think it was Rab Lazar, Rab Shimon, Rab Yosef, Rab Yudah, and Rebbe, I think, about where exactly in the north of the Azara. But anyways, so for now, I think it's okay. For now, we could just say that the Shechita is in the north of the Azara. I'm sure that we're probably going to. I wouldn't be surprised if we can have some proper diagrams coming up if need be, and we'll dig deeper. For now, the Shechita of the Korban is in the north of the Azara. Okay. Par v'sar shel Yom Kippurim. Okay. The par that's mechaper for the Kohanim, the sari that's mechaper for Am Yisrael on Yom Kippur. That is par anaisa bifnim, the sari anaisa bifnim. So they are kodshei kodshim. They are korban chatases. They're kodshei kodshim. Shchitasim batzafon. Okay, so they're slaughtered in the north of the Azar. V'kibul damon b'chlisharis batzafon, and their kabbalah sadam, the receiving of the blood, is in a service vessel, the klisharis, also in the north of the Azar. V'damon ton azaya bin abadim, and what happens to that blood? That blood is sprinkled between the poles of the Aron in the Kodesh HaKodashim. This is Yom Kippur, Lifnai v'Lifnim. Vala Paroches, and then back in the Heichel, the blood is sprinkled by the Paroches, by the curtain separating between the Heichel and the Kodesh HaKodashim. V'Mizbach Hazov, and on the golden altar, also in the Heichel. Matana Achas men me'akoves, and you gotta do all the sprinklings. We counted recently 43, or possibly even 47 or 48. We saw different shitas recently about how much sprinkling of blood there is on Yom Kippur. You gotta do all of them. Matana achas me'akaves, neglecting to do even one sprinkle is a problem. Shiari adam, and whatever blood is left over, hayashofech ayisod maravi shamazbeach achitzon, would be spilled on the western side of the outer mizbeach, right? The mizbeach in the Azar, right? So there's actually, right? So we're talking about three parts of the Beis Hamikdash over here. We're talking about the Aron in the Kodesh HaKodashim, and then going out to the Heichel. And in the Heichel, there's sprinkling by the Paroches as well as on the Mizbach Hazav. And then what happens is, when he leaves the Heichel, this could actually have been nice for a diagram, but when he leaves the Heichel, and he goes in from the Heichel into the Azara, he's now in the westernmost part of the Azara. So then he turns to the Mizbeach and he pours the Shiari Adam, whatever blood is left over, right there on the western, right? He's coming into the western part of the Azara. So he just walks up to the western wall of the Mizbeach and he pours the Shiari Adam, the leftover blood, on the Yesod of the western wall of the Mizbeach. Ve'im lo, right, in the Azar. Ve'im lo, nosan lo yikev. Okay, and if he didn't, I think it means if he didn't pour v'mlosan shirayim alel yesod. Yeah, if he didn't pour the shirayim on the yesod of the mizbeach achison in the Azar, nish gefährlich. Parim anisofim v'sirim anisofim. The other cows and goats that are burnt, for example, who could tell us? We've been discussing this for the past 2 months already between Horius and Zvachim. Parko in Mashiach, Parlim Dover Shel Tzibor, Siri Avodah Zarah. Right? If Bezdin rules that something regarding Avodah Zarah is taka permitted, so everybody does it, and they realize they made mistakes, they bring a Siri Avodah Zarah that's also entirely burnt, and its blood is sprinkled inside the heichel. So Pari Manisrafim, Siri Manisrafim, these cows that are burnt, these goats that are burnt, Shchitasim Batzafon, they are also Kachei Kachim, they're also Chatasis, they're also slaughtered in the north of the Azar, and their blood is received in Klesharis, also in the north of the Azar. V'damaton Azaya ala Parochis, and their blood is sprinkled on the Parochis in the Heichel Ba'al Mizbach Hazav, and on the golden altar, also in the Heichel Maton Achas Me'akaves, and also all applications of blood must be applied. If any are neglected, the korban is Pasal Shiari Adam, the leftover blood. Haya Shofech Ayisod Ma'aravi would be also poured on the western wall of the Mizbeach by the Yesod, would be poured onto the Yesod of the western wall of the Mizbeach. Shemizbeach Chitzon in the Azar Ve'im Lonoson Lo Ikev, and if he didn't pour the Shiari Adam on the Yesod of the Mizbeach, Nish Geferlach, it's okay. Elu Ve'elu Nusafin Abeis Hadeshin, and all of the Chatos Apnimios that we had mentioned, Elu Va'elu, whether we're talking about the Chatos Apnimios of Yom Kippur, right? The par and the Sar of Yom Kippur, or whether we're talking about the par Kohen Mashiach, par Elam Davashal Tzibur, Seirei Avodah Zarah, Nisrafim V'Sadashin, all of these Parim Nisrafim, Mesirim Nisrafim, they are going to be taken out, I believe, outside of Yerushalayim. What does Rashi say? The Mokum Shemusiyan Sadashin, Shemechuz Shemizbech Chitzon Dichsev Botzes Sadashin. Yeah, I think I feel like I saw recently that is outside of Yerushalayim. Yeah, Nisrafim Chutz Yerushalayim, says Rashi Mem Zayin Amud Aleph. And it would be burnt by the Beis Hadeshin outside of Yerushalayim, the entire, all of the meat, everything, right? There would be some emurin that would be offered on the Mizbeach HaChitzon, but otherwise all of the meat, everything goes outside of Yerushalayim and is burnt there by the Beis Hadeshin. No, friends, what do you say? If you look at our Mishnah, maybe some of you we're having this thought when you were looking at the Mishnah, but if we go back to the beginning of the Mishnah, it says, Ezehu Mekoman Zevachim. Okay, what's the place of the korbanos? Kachim shchitasim batzafon. Okay, kachim, they're slaughtered in the north. And then we go straight into Par V'Sar Shem Kippurim shchitasim batzafon. Okay, we say also the Par V'Sar Shem Kippurim shchitasim batzafon. V'kibudaman b'chisharis batzafon, and also Kabbalah Sadam is batzafon. So when we had first said kachim shchitasim batzafon, why didn't we say kachim shchitasim batzafon v'kibudaman b'chisharis batzafon like we say by Par V'Sar Shem Kippurim? So now, back in the Gemara, so v'nezni nami v'kibudaman b'chisharis batzafon, when we say kachim shchitasim batzafon, also say v'kibudaman b'chisharis batzafon, that the Kabbalah Sadam is also in the north of the Azar, because it is. So, and for the Gemara came in the Iko Osham Mitzorah Baram, because an Osham Mitzorah is kachim, and in Osham Mitzorah the Kabbalah Sadam is not in a klisharish batzafon. It's with your hands. I guess you just make a little bowl with your hands, you cup your hands, and you let the blood of the Osham Mitzorah squirt into your hands. And Osham Mitzorah, of course, is the Osham that's brought at the end of the purification process of the Mitzorah. Some of the blood goes on the ear and the bahonis of the Mitzorah. So again, V'nesnei nami v'kibudam v'chisharis v'tzafon, why not also say that the Kabbalah Sadam is in a klisharis in the tzafon, came the Ika Osham, because since that's the sort of the general mention of kachei kachim, and kachei kachim includes Osham Mitzorah, so came the Ika Osham Mitzorah, the kibudam b'yad, that its Kabbalah Sadam is in a hand, not in a klisharis. Shairei, Bayadu, Shairei, that is why the Mishnah dropped the Klisharis Batzafon, because not all Kachim are Kabbalas Adam b'Kli Sharis Batzafon, not the Asham Mitzora. V'lo, but is that really the case? Is an Asham Mitzora not Kabbalas Adam in a Kli Sharis? V'akatani lo likaman, but later on in a Mishnah, and Daf Nun Dalid, it says Asham Nazir v'Asham Mitzora Shchitasan Batzafon v'Kibud Daman b'Kli Sharis Batzafon. But later on in the Mishnah and Daf Nun Dalid Amud Beis, it says that Asham Nazir and also Asham Mitzora, their shchita is in the north of the Azar, and also Kibud Daman b'Kli Sharis Batzafon, as well as the Kabbalas Adam. The Kabbalas Adam is in a Kli Sharis in the north of the Azar. So, if you're telling me that the Mishnah, our Mishnah, says Kachim Shchitasim Batzafon and leaves out V'Kibudam B'Kli Sharis Batzafon because out of concern for Asham Mitzora, because there's no Kli Sharis Batzafon by Asham Mitzora, that's not true. If we look at the Mishnah and Daf Nun Daled and Beis, Dafka says that by Asham Mitzora there is Kibudam B'Kli Sharis Batzafon. No, friends, what do you say? So here's the deal. Listen up. Here's the deal. Meikara, initially in our Mishnah, Savar Kibul Damo Bayad Hu Shairei. Well, initially, the Tana of our Mishnah was under the impression that the Kabbalas Adam for Asham Mitzora is strictly in the hands. So therefore, it left out in our Mishnah the whole thing about Kabbalas Adam b'Kli Sharis Batzafon. However, v'chevon dechazah delo sagile delo b'chli. However, I just amended the words a little bit based on different notes. However, when the Tana then realized that, wait, the Kabbalas Adam of the Asham Mitzora is not strictly in your hands, but there is also Kabbalas Adam b'Kli, and the Zrikas Adam on the Mizbeach for in Asham Mitzora is going to be from a Kli, and that blood in the Kli was received from the neck of the animal. So Hadar Tanya, so that is why later on Daf Nun Dalid, it says that by Asham Mitzora, there's Kibud Daman b'Kli Sharis Batzafon, because the Tana realized that by Asham Mitzora there also is Kabbalas Adam b'Kli Sharis. So there's Kabbalas Adam b'Yad, sure, but also b'Kli Sharis by Asham Mitzora. The Tana that we learned in the Brayso v'lokach yachol b'Kli, that when it says by Asham Mitzora, it says v'lokach hakoyin midama Asham, and that's a reference to Kabbalas Adam. I think that's the point. So reference to Kabbalas Adam. So when it says v'lokach yachol b'Kli, is it possible that the Kabbalas Adam by Asham Mitzora is in a vessel, a Kli Sharis? Tamlum v'nosan. Well, it says in the same pasuk, "V'lokach." I'm reading from the pasuk, "Hakoyin midama Asham v'nosan hakoyin al tenuchos and mitayr," etc. So the kohen takes the blood and he places it on the ear, on the behonis. So manasina ba'atzma shakoyin aflikicha ba'atzma shakoyin. So just like the application of the blood on the ear and the behonis of the mitzvah, that is by hand, not by vessel. He takes his finger, sticks it in the blood, puts it on the ear, on the behonis. So just like that is by hand, so also the Kabbalas Adam is by hand. Okay, what about for the Mizbeach? What about the Zrikas Adam for the Mizbeach? Is that also coming from the Kohen's hand? So it also says by Asham Mitzora, ki kachata so Asham, that the Asham is like a chatos. Machatas tuuna kli, just like by Korban Chatos, the Kabbalas Adam is in a Kli Sharis, and then the Zrikas Adam is from that Kli Sharis. The Zrikas Adam is not from the Kli Sharis. Well, the dipping of the fingers will be into the Kli Sharis. But anyways, by a Korban Chatos, the Kabbalas Adam is in a vessel, in a Kli Sharis. Af Asham Ton Kli, so also in Asham Mitzora requires a Kli Sharis. Ninsis Ata Omer Nu. So what do we see at the end? Apparently, there has to be Kabbalas Adam by an Asham Mitzora, Kabbalas Adam with a Kli Sharis, like a Chatas, but also with the hands of the Kohen. So Asham Mitzora, Shnei Kohanim Mekablan Estamo. So by an Asham Mitzora, it takes two Kohanim for Kabbalas Adam. Echad b'yad ve'echad b'kli. One Kohen is receiving the blood into a Kli Sharis, the other is receiving the blood into his hands. However, being a Kohen is bloody work. But you do get the first aliyah. and you get you get like to do stuff first, but it's bloody work. So the kohen who received the blood in the vessel goes to the mizbeach and does rikas adam. And the kohen who did the kabbalas adam into his hands goes to the mitzorah and starts applying the blood onto the mitzorah's ear and behonis. Friends, that was Daf Mem Zayin of Masechta Zevachim. On Daf Mem Zayin of Masechta Zevachim, we wrapped up the fourth parak of Masechta Zevachim, parak Beis Shammai, with a discussion about whose intention is important when it comes to, for example, pigul, let's just say. So, but this could also be like, for example, the intention of a chatas being for chatas. So the Mishnah had said that what's important is specifically the intention of the Ovid, the one doing the work. His intention is what's important. The intention of the owner is irrelevant. That was the opinion of the Chacham in the Mishnah. However, Balazar Bar Yossi holds that also the intention of the owner is significant as well. We then saw some other scenarios by like Rabbi Eliezer when it comes to shchita. He says that the opinion of the thoughts of the machshava of the owner of the animal is also relevant. So if the owner is an ovid kuchavim, Rabbi Eliezer says that the shchita will be psula. And we also saw that this is the view of Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar when it comes to Otzah on Shabbos, that even if you have something that's less than a shear and normally would be potter for Otzah on Shabbos, if the owner of that item stashed it away because he attributed significance to it, if somebody else then is motzi it on Shabbos, that person will be chayiv since the owner had attributed significance to it. Friends, so that was the first section of the daf, wrapping up the fourth parak of Masechta Zevachim, and then we began the famous parak of Ezehu Mekoman. We just kind of got our feet wet discussing Kodshei Kodshim being slaughtered in the north of the Azara, as well as their Kabbalas Adam. Friends, and we then got into a little discussion about Mitzorah. By Osher Mitzorah, their Kabbalas Adam is both with the vessel as well as in the hand of the kohen, so he could then apply from the blood on the ear and the bahonis of the Mitzorah. Friends, that was Daf Mem Zayin of Masechta Zevachim. I hope you enjoyed. Cheers.